trend. You come home and the first thing you do is turn something on. Not because you're excited to watch or listen. Not because there's something you've been waiting for. You do it before your coat is off, before the keys have left your hand, the remote finds your palm. The playlist starts opening. The headphones are already settling around your neck. The screen lights up. The speaker hums to life. Voices arrive, calm and familiar. They don't ask anything of you, they just occupy the space. Something in you softens, not dramatically, just enough to notice the difference between the moment before the sound and the moment after. The room stops feeling like a room that belongs only to you. You move through the evening with it on, you cook with it on, you scroll with it on, you exist with it on. At no point do you ask yourself why. The quiet felt like something that needed fixing so fast. You've done this in every place you've lived. Different walls, different furniture, different versions of your life. The ritual stays almost identical. The second the external noise drops, something in you moves to replace it. You've caught yourself doing it in other people's homes too, reaching for your phone the moment a conversation lulls, filling the quiet before anyone has to sit inside it. It isn't about the content you've put on podcasts you never finished, videos you weren't watching, music you weren't hearing. What matters isn't the words. What matters is that something is happening in the room besides you. You didn't decide this. It just became the way the day moves. You can trace it back if you try. A childhood house that was too quiet in certain rooms, a period of your life spent mostly alone when the television was less about entertainment and more about company that didn't require anything of you. You don't remember deciding that silence was something to avoid. You only remember that at some point it started to feel that way, and the feeling never really left. Now it shows up everywhere, disguised as preference.
I just work better with something on.
I like falling asleep to a voice.
I always have music going.
These sound like small facts about who you are. They rarely get questioned. Least of all by you. You sit down to work, and the video starts before your hands are on the keyboard. You tell yourself it helps you focus. The voice is steady, explaining something you're only half following. Every time your mind drifts toward what you actually need to do, the voice pulls it gently back into someone else's thoughts. You don't notice how often you do this until the video ends and the sudden quiet makes the room feel too still. Your shoulders tense before you register why. You reach for the next one without thinking. In the evening, you cook with something playing on the counter. The sound moves with you from the cutting board to the stove. You stir, you taste, you plate the food. The voice keeps talking. Even though you stopped listening minutes ago, you've started to associate the taste of your own cooking with the sound of someone else speaking. At night, it's the same. You lie in bed with something playing beside you, rain, a video, an old episode you've already seen. Your body is tired. Your eyes are closed. But your mind keeps trying to land on things you've been avoiding all day. Every time it gets close, the sound shifts, a new sentence begins, and the thought gets carried somewhere else. You're not listening anymore. You're using the noise to keep certain parts of yourself from arriving. One night the video ends and the next one doesn't start. You're left in the dark with nothing between you and the inside of your head. Your heartbeat feels too loud. Your thoughts feel too close, like they've been waiting behind a door you've been keeping shut with sound. You reach for the phone again, find something else, press play. The relief is quiet and immediate, and that's the part you don't say out loud. You start to notice what happens when the noise disappears for too long. It doesn't feel like ordinary boredom, it feels like exposure. The room becomes too honest about how empty it is when no one is speaking into it. You start talking to yourself more, small, unnecessary comments filling the space your own mind used to hold before the background took over. Slowly, the waiting became your life, not waiting for anything specific. Just existing in the in-between state where something is always playing. So you don't have to feel how much of your time gets spent there. The frightening thing is how normal this started to feel. You stopped calling it avoidance, you started calling it, I just like having something on. There's a version of you that knows better, That version shows up sometimes, usually late, usually tired, usually right when you reach for the remote out of habit rather than desire. It doesn't say much, it just notices. And for a second, before the noise starts, you notice it noticing. You've built a whole architecture around not being alone with yourself. Sound in the car, sound in the shower if you could manage it. Sound while you fall asleep, sound the second you wake, so that the very first and very last moments of your day are never actually yours. You wonder, sometimes, what it would sound like to wake up into nothing you've forgotten. The people around you don't notice because it doesn't look like anything. It looks like a person who likes music, a person who's just used to having a podcast on. Nobody asks why. You've never had to explain it because it doesn't look like something that needs explaining. That's exactly why it's lasted this long. There's a specific kind of silence that used to feel different from all the others, the kind after a hard conversation or the kind in a car on a long drive when neither of you has spoken in a while. You remember reaching for the radio dial almost on instinct, not because the silence was bad, but because you weren't sure what would happen if you let it sit there long enough. You've done that instinctively so many times you no longer register it as a choice. You've noticed, too, how certain feelings only seem to catch up with you at the exact moments the sound stops, waiting for a video to buffer. A song ending on shuffle before the next one loads, a phone call disconnecting mid-sentence. In those small gaps, something rises that you weren't expecting. Not sadness exactly, not anxiety exactly, just a kind of pressure, like a held breath you didn't know you were holding. And then the next sound arrives and the pressure goes back under and you forget it was ever there. You've started to wonder quietly whether the noise was ever really about the noise at all. On weekends, it gets worse in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. A weekend has fewer built-in reasons to have sound on. No commute, no coworkers talking nearby, no meetings filling the hours with other people's voices, so you build the reasons yourself. You put a show on for the background while you clean. Except you're not really cleaning, you're standing in the middle of the room half watching something you've already seen, holding a cloth you haven't used in 10 minutes. You tell yourself you'll turn it off once you start actually working. You don't turn it off. The show becomes the day structure, one episode bleeding into the next, marking time the way a clock would if you were willing to look at one. You've noticed you get a specific kind of tired from this that isn't like other tiredness. It isn't the tiredness of doing too much. It's the tiredness of never quite landing anywhere. Of spending hours partially present to a dozen different things and fully present to none of them, including yourself. At the end of a day like that, you can't always say what you did, only that something was on the whole time and that you feel strangely depleted for someone who mostly sat still. Sometimes you catch a version of this in other people, and it startles you. The way seeing a mirror at an odd angle can startle you. A friend who can't sit in a restaurant without checking their phone the second the conversation pauses. A family member who falls asleep to the television every single night, no exceptions, and gets irritable if the remote goes missing. You recognize it instantly in them and say nothing, because naming it in someone else would mean admitting. You know exactly what it looks like from the inside. There's a moment when you realize the background noise stopped being background a long time ago. It became the main presence in the room. The voices that don't know you, the stories that aren't yours, the music that doesn't require anything from you. They became the thing you come home to, the thing that makes the space feel inhabited when you're the only one in it. And the silence started to feel like a confrontation, not with anything dramatic, just with the fact that when it's quiet, you're there. All the way there. Nothing left between you and whatever has been moving underneath your days. You don't hate the noise that would be simpler. You're grateful for it in a way. It kept certain things at a manageable distance. It made the loneliness feel less like loneliness and more like atmosphere. But lately you've started to feel the cost of that arrangement. The quiet now feels foreign, like something you have to prepare for. Like it might reveal how long it's been since you sat with yourself without anything helping you look away. At some point, avoidance stopped feeling temporary. It stopped being a thing you were doing until you felt ready and became simply the way you lived. And that's the part you don't say out loud, not even to the people closest to you. That most days you'd rather not know what you'd find in the quiet. And the noise was never really about entertainment at all. It was about staying one step ahead of yourself. A few evenings later, you come home. You put your keys down, you take off your shoes. The apartment is quiet in that late afternoon way, still holding the heat of the day. Your hand moves toward the remote out of habit. You don't press it. You sit on the edge of the couch. The cushions make their usual sound. Your breath is audible. Your thoughts are audible too, in that strange way thoughts become when nothing is competing with them. You don't try to do anything with them. You just let them be there, moving at their own pace. It feels strange, not peaceful, not profound, just strange, like sitting across from someone you used to know well, but haven't spoken to properly in a long time. After a while, you get up and make tea. The water boils loud in the quiet. You notice the sound of it. You notice the steam. You notice that nothing is asking you to be anywhere else. You still put something on later that night. That isn't the point. The point is that for a little while, you didn't. Most days the noise is still there. You still reach for it. Still feel the immediate softening when the room fills with voices that aren't yours. But now there are small, ordinary moments where you notice the reaching before it happens. You notice the part of you that treats silence like something to manage. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes you let it stay unmanaged a little longer. The comfort is still there. The strange, familiar comfort of having something playing. But every so often you catch yourself wondering what else might be comfortable too. What might happen if the background stayed background? And you stayed.